So once again, apologies for we lost electricity at the start of this Eucharist. I, for a minute, felt I was back in Goa with no lights on, but it was a nice experience that you just trust in the Lord, and as Saint Therese did, learn to smile through even the darkest moments. So we celebrate on the 18th of October this year. We will be celebrating Mission Sunday. And spiritually guiding and guarding this whole month as we begin the month on the 1st of October is Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, Saint Therese of Lisieux, also she's known, or the Little Flower, known by so many names, who is also the patroness of the missions. She was born on the 2nd of January in the year 1873 in France. Therese was the last of 9 children. Of the 9 children, only 5 of her siblings lived to reach adulthood. Her parents, her mother herself died when Therese was a little girl of just 4 years old. She died of cancer. Her parents, Louise and Zélie Martin, were a very holy couple prior to getting married. Both of them individually had discerned religious life, but as it is, things changed. They got married. They had 9 children, but both of them were canonized on the 18th of October 2015. In fact, they were the first couple to be canonized as a couple and also proposed for canonization as a couple. What do we know about the early childhood of Saint Therese? Because understanding that this little flower who died at a very young age of 24 lived all her 24 years so beautifully. Therese always had a very personal connection with heaven. I read this line and I thought, how beautiful is that? She had a personal connection. Do we all have that kind of very personal connection with heaven? At the age of 14, on the eve of Christmas in the year 1886, Therese had a conversion moment that transformed her life completely. You know, she overheard her father say to her that she was getting very old for all these silly traditions at Christmas as a child. Not that the traditions of Christmas were silly, but the ones attached to children were being rather silly. I presume he must have been talking about some concept of Santa Claus. And so Saint Therese at first felt very crushed. She was very broken, but she came to realize that it was time for her, in a way, to mature, to become more aware of others rather than meet only her own needs. And from then on, you see in this lovely saint a very powerful energy. You see a sensitive spirit towards love that she developed, instead of keeping always to herself and thinking always about herself. At about this time, she began to read a little book which I always recommend to a lot of people. I read it as a young seminarian, written by Thomas Kempis. It is called The Imitations of Christ, a little difficult book to read, but indeed a great spiritual book for all people who seek God. And Thomas Kempis had a great impact on her to the extent that Therese memorized many sections of this book already at a very young age. That summer, when she was just 14 years old, Therese heard of a man who was convicted of murder. And this man was supposed to be on death row. He was supposed to be guillotined. She discovered that this man was extremely unrepentant. And Therese began to be very concerned about his soul. She prayed every day for this man that he would have a conversion before he faced his death. And she was also told that this man had become very spiteful. He shunned even the priests who went to him, asking him and calling him towards repentance. And yet this man showed no remorse. And Therese kept praying for him up until his dying. The day in which this man died, it seems he was brought to the guillotine. Head was put there, and then in a flash, he grabbed a crucifix that somebody had and he kissed it 3 times before he died. And Therese was in a way ecstatic on hearing this news. because she felt that God had answered her prayers for somebody else. And from now on, she turned her eyes constantly to the needs of others, praying for others, especially praying for the salvation of souls. When Therese was all of 15 years, she accompanied her father and her two sisters on a pilgrimage to Rome. Her two sisters, Pauline and Marie, had decided to join the Carmelite convent. And Therese, who along with her sisters and her father met the Pope, when she met the Pope, she asked the Pope for permission. She said, I want your permission to also join my sisters in the convent. The reason why she had to ask for permission, because she was too young to join the convent. And the Holy Father at that time told her, he said, if God wills, why not? Why not? Therese went back, met her local bishop, who granted her permission, and at an age of 15 years old, this young girl, imagine our 10th standard young girl saying, I'm in love with Jesus, I want to spend the rest of my life in a Carmelite convent. And so in 1888, she began her year of postulancy. She took the name Saint Therese of the child Jesus and of the Holy Face, and that is why she is known as Saint Therese of the child Jesus. Now, if you look at Therese's life, she dedicated her entire life to simple acts. For her personal belief was that it was in these daily small tasks. I mean, if you look at some of the pictures online, yesterday I spent a good part of the day I was so absorbed with her life. There is a picture of her. Her sister, evidently, from what I was told, had a camera, and her sister was allowed against regulations, because taking photographs at that time was frowned upon, literally. Her sister, who was a nun, was given permission, and she clicked several pictures of Therese, one of them washing her laundry along with the others. In fact, somewhere Therese talks about how her sister, who in the convent loved to annoy her, she would keep splashing soap water on her, and Therese learned absolutely not to react. So Therese became known as Saint Therese the Little Way. Why? Because she spoke about doing ordinary things with extraordinary love. Ordinary things in the house. I mean, just think about it. We cook, we clean, we wash, we do so many ordinary things, and we think this doesn't matter. It matters. If we do it with great love, if you look at the photographs of Saint Therese, you'll see that she had a beautiful countenance. I mean, yesterday when I was reading about her life, and I kept reading and reading, I kept saying to myself, Lord, I need to pray to Saint Therese to give me this peace. Yeah, I'm a person who likes to do so many things, but I get agitated so often. And I said, I need to learn how to smile. I don't know, maybe I smile for the camera sometimes. Sometimes I don't, and you tell me. But just the disposition within us that Therese had, doing ordinary things in such an extraordinary way. She lived a very hidden life. I think Therese would have never been known unless her autobiography was not published. That also not because she wanted to write it, because her superior told us. But she lived a very ordinary life, a very simple life of prayer. She was gifted with great intimacy with God. She could really commune with God. Through her sickness, through her dark nights of doubt and fear, she always remained faithful to God, rooted in God's love and mercy. Today, I won't tell you who, but somebody wrote me a mail and said, a letter and said, I think, Father, I failed God. In these 6 months, I failed Him. And I said, no, we haven't. Each one of us in these 6 months have struggled. Each one of us have carried our own little crosses. And each one of us, or rather accepted our crosses, not carried our crosses, accepted our crosses, that willingly accepted. And we have learned also to smile through these 6 months of this pandemic. And Therese, no matter what she went through, even though she died of tuberculosis at the end, she was faithful to God in these little ways. One of the things Therese loved, and I thought, my God, so do I, was she loved flowers. Yeah, she absolutely loved flowers. She saw herself literally as the little flower of Jesus, who gave glory to God just by being her beautiful little self in God's garden. She saw herself as one of the flowers of God's garden. And because of this beautiful analogy, that title stuck to her, The Little Flower, remains with her till today. In her autobiography, which she wrote, The Story of the Soul, Therese explained how she formed a habit, literally, of conquering her moods. She admits to being a very moody person. In fact, when she talks about her childhood, she speaks of the fact that she was pampered by the whole family, and perhaps in that way, she turned out to be a bit moody. And then she realized she had to conquer her moods. And this is what she writes, and let me read it to you. She says, "When things that are irritable or disagreeable befall me, instead of assuming an air of sadness, I responded by a smile. At first, I was not always successful, but now it is a habit which I am happy to have acquired." Something I think, my dear brothers and sisters, we can all learn from. Learning even sometimes people who annoy us on a daily basis, perhaps learning to smile and just being accepting of other people's feelings. While alive, Saint Therese made two promises that have been ringing true even since her death. The first was, she said, "I will spend my heaven doing good on earth." How wonderful. I will spend. The fact that she lived for heaven, I think in a way she realized that she was destined for heaven, but that even in heaven, she is there for all of us on earth. The other thing that she said was, "I will let fall from heaven a shower of roses." This is one of the ways in which Saint Therese communicates to those who intercede to her. You have the beautiful Saint Therese Rose Novena, that many people who have said that novena in their hearts have either, or in their lives, have either physically received roses or seen roses as a way of saying your wish has been, your prayer has been heard, or have got the smell of roses as a consequence of their intercession to her. Down the years, Saint Therese, who, look at it, must be about 125, 140 years rather, since she was born, has been endorsed by all the popes. This is a pope, this is a saint of the last century, but she's been endorsed by all of them. Pope Pius X introduced her cause for already in the year 1914. Within 30 years of her passing away, in April of 1923, Pope Benedict XV declared her blessed. And immediately after that, Pope Pius XI in the year 1925 beatified and canonized her, making her the patroness of the missions and of missionaries. In fact, he spoke of Saint Therese as the star of his pontificate. Then again, Pope Pius XII made her the patroness of France in 1954 when they opened the cathedral dedicated to Saint Therese of Lisieux. He spoke of her as a person who penetrated the very heart of God. Pope Paul VI offered her as a teacher of prayer and theological virtue of hope. He asked teachers, educationists, theologians, priests to actually study her work. And then I think the biggest crowning glory for the saint came on the 100th anniversary of her death in the year 1997. It was the 19th of October. It was Mission Sunday when Saint Pope John Paul II proclaimed her as a doctor of the church. Now, this is a great honor because in the Catholic Church we have only 3 women who are doctors of the church: Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Teresa of Avila, and then Saint Therese, the Little Flower. This was done in recognition of her wisdom and her understanding of love. She was a saint on passion with God, absolutely, in her love for God, in her way of her holiness. I think the one question that would cross all our minds is, why did Pope Pius XI, when he canonized her, make her the patroness of the missions? I mean, when you read her life, There is a section that says that she was appointed to go to Saigon in Vietnam, but she fell sick and therefore was never sent. As a person, she never put her foot in any mission station, and yet she was the patroness of the missions. I think what makes a missionary is not your legs that go to a place, but what makes you a missionary is your heart. If your heart is burning with love for Jesus Christ, then nothing can separate you. St. Paul says so beautifully, who can separate us from the love of God? Can death, can difficulties, can torment? What can separate us? Even the lights that went off can't separate us from the love of God. If we love God, we will celebrate the Eucharist. We will not make a fuss. Well, if we don't love God, then each one of us has a reason to crib and grumble. So her heart really burned for God. And while she may never have gone to a mission station, she had that zeal for souls. That zeal, therefore, to answer the call of God to go out into the whole world and baptize, even though she was stuck all her life in that convent. Think about this. Our means as being a missionary might be different. Some may pray, some may write, some may preach, some may sing music, some may arrange flowers. The goal and the motive are always the same. The means are different. The goal and the motive is always the same, and that is to save souls by love, and that is what Saint Therese did. It was very interesting that even in her lifetime, there were some who thought, well, what has she done? What has she done? She was just in a convent. One of her own sisters spoke of Saint Therese when she died, and they said, well, she was very charming, that's all. What is Mother Superior ever going to write in her logbook about her? And yet 100 years later after her death, she became one of the most loved saints of this last century. Within a year, as I said, her autobiography was read by so many. Great miracles were attributed to her. People changed their lives because of Saint Therese. Even they say in World War I, the French airline pilots who took off during war would keep a photograph of Saint Therese with them in the plane as a sign of protection. Saint Therese died at the age of 24 on the 30th of September 1897. And the last words on her lips were, "My God, I love you." I'd like you to spend a few moments, my dear brothers and sisters, just contemplating on what I've said and on the life of the saint. And maybe in your own silence, if you can keep saying those words, "My God, I love you."